Good morning. Good morning. My name is Vanessa Nazario, and I have the honor and pleasure of kicking off our panel conversations this morning. Vanessa Nazario, I'm the Chief Belonging and Equity Officer at Memorial Healthcare System. And again, I have the honor and privilege of hosting what is going to be a really powerful, dynamic conversation among these amazing panelists, which you'll get to hear from them in a minute. But our power panel is Standing on Business, Evaluating Business Commitments to DEI Efforts. And just to give a little context in terms of what the conversation is going to entail, it really is going to dig into understanding, the fact that in recent years, many businesses have made all sorts of public commitments to advancing DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, within their respective organization. These commitments, as many of you might recall, included pledges, how to foster diverse talent pathways, promote inclusive work cultures, support equitable community initiatives. However, and this is the reason we're gathered this morning, is the question is, have these businesses upheld their promises? So we're going to unpack that a little bit, and we have a set of amazing questions that I'll be able to ask our panelists here. But before we dive deep into the dialogue, I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, their name, the title of their organization, and where they're based. So Jill, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jill Littlejohn Bostick, and I serve as the Vice President of Corporate Responsibility and Inclusion for Winnebago Industries. I also serve as the Executive Director of our corporate foundation, and our company is based in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, right outside of the Twin Cities.
Perfect. Thank you. Darrell?
Thanks, Vanessa, and hello, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Darrell Booker. I am within Microsoft's Philanthropies division, founding lead one of our racial equity commitments from 2020, and I hold the title of Corporate Affairs Specialist, and I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you. Cindy, you want to say good morning, introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Cindy Mason, and I am the market leader for one of the most diverse counties in the country here in Broward County. I am the market leader for Florida Blue.
Good morning. Good morning. So, just by way of their introductions, you see we do have a powerhouse group, and I'm excited to get in conversation. And when I do these moderations, I like to frame it in such a way where it's table talk, right? I'm channeling Oprah Winfrey this morning, and I have these amazing speakers with me, and to really just unpack this conversation around where things are relative to the commitment. So we're going to kick it off with one question that I'll ask all the panelists to address. And if I may, I'll start with you, Jill. And the first question here is really and this is really going to lay the framework for the balance of the dialogue is, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd back in 2020, many corporations pledged their commitment to expending more efforts in DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, to amplify marginalized voices. And we saw all those pledges, right, all over the place, dollars being deployed and invested. And I guess the question I have for you is, what are successful strategies or best practices to ensure companies are meeting and maintaining their commitments? And how can we, as community conveners, hold business accountable and encourage others to do the same, right? So, what are those strategies to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing based on the commitments they made? So, Jill, I'll start with you, and then Darrell, I'll pass it to you, and Cindy, you can wrap us up.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Vanessa. Honestly, I think this is a two-folded question that goes hand in hand. When I think about what companies did after the murder of George Floyd, is we had a lot of performative allyship. We had a lot of companies that were talking the talk and putting out commitments and saying a number of things that they wanted to do because, I think as a country, we were all hurting. Our employees were hurting. We wanted to do something. We wanted to act fast. And so, there are some companies who have, made those commitments, made those pledges. But I think what's most important is that we don't need words. We need actions. You can tell me what you're going to do, but really what we need companies to do is to show us, not necessarily tell me. I prefer the companies that have been successful, in my opinion, are those organizations who did not make large announcements and did not say, here's what I'm going to do, but actually went out, did the work, were on the ground. They were putting their money behind the organizations that were fighting or working towards racial equity. They were already lifting up and amplifying the voices of the organizations and those in the community that were doing the work. And then they reported out what they did, right? And so I think when you think about the companies who have sustained the work since the murder of George Floyd, are those companies who really were focused on the work and not necessarily focused on the praise. Now, we do have an opportunity to, to sustain this work, whether your company did make those pledges, because there were a lot that did. Is, how do we then take an opportunity to take a step back and look at purposeful planning, being okay to pivot, because again, a lot of these companies made knee-jerk reactions without really understanding the implications. And so without having the ability to pivot and hold themselves accountable in terms of what we'll do going forward, then those are the companies that I can get behind. Those are the companies that I'm saying they are really committed to the work and not just doing performative allyship.
Thank you, Jill. So, Darrell, I'll turn to you to sort of expand on that. And again, there were a lot of commitments, and how do we make sure that businesses have sort of deployed the right strategies to meet those commitments that they sort of pledged early on? So, your thoughts on that conversation.
Yeah, I'll piggyback a little bit, off of what Jill said from the standpoint of, being non-performative. And what that involves is not necessarily just saying, here's a pot of money, we're going to give it to, one or two HBCUs that are household names, or, one or two other nonprofits that are household names, but instead really take the time to understand what are those issues, where are those, racial injustices, and then as a company, what are you best suited for to help address those issues, and also coming to grips, and this is okay, and understanding that you're not going to solve the problem within 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. We may even argue not even 10 years. This is, trying to undo and reverse, at this point, centuries of, oppression, racism, non-inclusiveness, every word that you can think of. So I think those companies that are taking a much more thoughtful approach, a more strategic approach, understanding how they can, weave these concepts into their entire mission, everything that they do, not only inside the walls of their company, but then also how they're extending outside of the walls of their company.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is, these are not necessarily short-term, resolutions. It's really going to take sort of a longer, broad view in terms of really making an impact. So, although there were sort of initial sort of reactions, if you will, right, and commitments deployed, the reality is that this is definitely long-term work. So Cindy, I want to hear from you in terms of again, based on what you've heard from your peers here, what are those strategies to make sure that organizations that made these commitments are held accountable, and maybe you have specific examples of maybe things you've seen or heard or deployed yourself to make sure that things are getting done according to all the terrific commitments that were made.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to what has already been shared by Jill and Darrell. When I think about that question, the best way, in my opinion, to answer it is with an example of what Florida Blue has done in this particular situation. When I look at the fact that, Florida Blue Guidewell has been long supporter of health equity initiatives. One of the things that stand out is, of course, COVID-19 and the tragedy of George Floyd being really the pillars behind the exacerbation of the disconnect in social disparities that we're seeing across the United States. And back in 2020, what Guidewell did is we, as an organization, were able to launch is what is called an Equity Alliance team.
Mhm.
And their overall focus was to really identify 4 work streams that can be deployed across our communities. And it would be backed by direct funding of $25 million over a 5-year spread.
Mhm.
And it's exciting, for us to be able to share that within 4 years, we have been able to commit 23 million of the 25. And so, of course, we will exceed that goal and achieve it, by year end. And the benefit of that is these are dollars that are going into supplier diversity, the community, provider care, as well as enterprise, workforce initiatives that we do in terms of partnering with other businesses and nonprofit organizations across our communities. So it is exactly what was shared earlier is one thing to go about putting all of these different efforts in place and making all of these commitments, but what are you going to do to sustain it? And what are you going to do to actually put action behind it versus, just saying the things that you're going to do? So I like the fact that, that's a clear example of an organization, if you will, that has done it right.
Perfect. Thank you for that example, and kudos to Florida Blue, right, for talking the talk and deploying the necessary funds, because that's the other thing, right? I mean, we can make commitments day in and day out, but what are the assets that are really being tied to those commitments? Because as we know, it takes real resources to drive change, right? And investing back in these very same communities, uplifting all this stuff. It's there's resources that need to be associated with all these actionable items, right? So kudos to you all for the large commitments, and it sounds like you're starting to see the impact of that work. And one of the things that I've come to learn, right, sort of leading this work at Memorial, is that it takes a village. It really does. You can't do it by yourself, right? So we are a healthcare organization, and we're focused on delivering the best, sort of care that is culturally competent. However, to address sort of all the different things that have occurred and continue to occur in terms of, marginalized communities and discrimination and bias and social inequities, it's going to take a village to really come together. So, Joe, the next question is for you: is how do you engage external stakeholders such as customers, suppliers, community organizations to support equitable initiatives and address broader societal issues related to DEI, right? So, how do you sort of get out of the 4 walls, right, and sort of connect with these organizations and these various groups to really bring to life DEI endeavors?
Yes, so Winnebago Industries, we're an outdoor lifestyle company. So yes, Winnebago RV, for those of you who know the RV brand, but
Mhm.
we have RVs, we have boats, and so we're really focused on outdoor adventure. And so for us, it's really important to connect our business strategy, because every organization, every company has a business strategy. And so how do we connect our business strategy to amplify our community partners? So our
Mhm.
community partners are extremely important to the work that we do. One of the questions that what I got when I first started working in this organization is like, do Black people RV? And I'm like, yes, we do, in droves. And there are actually organizations that are over 30 plus years old who have been doing this work and convening groups together. And so instead of us trying to figure out a way to create a pathway as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we purposefully seek out those organizations who have been doing the work, who have been on the ground
Mhm.
and continue to amplify their voice. And also, like Darrell mentioned earlier, what are those long-term partnerships, and what's the long-term impact? If this is not an overnight journey, I tell people, I compare it to, this is not a 5K, this is not a sprint, this is like an ultra marathon, right? Not even just a regular marathon. This is an ultra marathon. And so really making sure that we align with those partners. We bring out, we go to our owner events, we're on the ground, we host events, we host sessions, we bring in those community partners, we bring our products in place. We have different events where we're sharing the different ways and the intersectionalities that exist within DEI to connect the dots. And by doing that, we began to have meaningful conversations. For the past 2 years, we've had conversations with some of our owners to say, what can I do, right? So to our actual customers, instead of us just saying, here are the things that we're doing, we've begun to say, here are some tangible steps that you can take to help us on this journey as it relates to DEI. Now, will that change again overnight? No, but if we can get one person, right, to begin to take the steps, they get another person to begin to take the steps, then over time, I truly believe that we'll have a larger impact.
So it sounds like aligning with organizations that are similar minded, right, and sort of focus on the same mission, because that's where it becomes extremely synergistic. So, Darrell, sorry, I want to ask you the same question. I apologize. I know I keep going back to Darrell. See, I need
That's
to. Anyway, I'll talk about that. But anyway, so what are you doing, in terms of connecting with that external broader community to really become partners and allies, if you will, in driving DEI initiatives across your organization?
Yeah, so this is at the heart of the work that we started literally in June of 2020, and thinking of how as we as Microsoft can make a difference at an individual level.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get to, everybody in this country, especially when we think of, the marginalized communities. No matter how big people think we are, if we do, it wouldn't be necessarily sustainable. But instead, how can we work with those entities that are providing those valuable human and social services every day? And that's those nonprofits, those community-based organizations, in more of a one-to-many fashion at a very, very hyper-local level, working with those organizations, making sure they have everything that they need from a technology standpoint to have a highest impact on their mission, no matter what that mission is. If we can just make sure that we level their playing field in technology, that they can, work as collaborative and efficient as possible, we know it will have some impact on the work that they're doing. But then also through them, we can bring a lot of our STEM and STEAM-based skilling and workforce development to those, within the community that's needed. So that's the nonprofit tech acceleration program that I lead. To date, we've brought this to over 1,800 communities at a zip code level. 3,000 nonprofits, and our work is, really rooted in building those relationships. Going into communities, having lunch and learns, receptions, town hall convenings, you name it, bringing out all the community leaders so that they can actually see and touch and hear from people like me at Microsoft and really understand that we are genuine with what we want to do, and just bring awareness to all the tools and resources that they just have no idea that we have for them to be able to, skill and upskill themselves. And then also too, similar to what Bill said, I try to align with all the needs at other corporations, because like you said, it takes a village, and we all play our part. And no, it shouldn't be on one entity to solve all of this. We all should understand what is the element that we bring to the table. How do we, pair ourselves with like-minded peers who are doing what they're doing? And the way I love to say it is, you bring the hot dogs, I bring the buns, and we have a really great out together.
And it turns out to be a wonderful picnic, and everybody gets to eat, right? I hear you loud and clear. How about you, Cindy? What are you doing to connect with external stakeholders, right, like customers and suppliers and community organizations to support equitable initiatives?
Yeah, I was thinking, Darrell, we need ketchup. No mustard. No mustard. um, so there is so much to unpack in that question. One of the things that, and again, I have to speak largely from the GuideWell platform. We recently, a few years ago, added inclusion in our set of core values. And I think the fact that they called that out, after what, again, we have identified as the tragedy and COVID-19, that says a lot about the organization and understanding, the need to be very centric and focused in that particular space. But long and short of that is, when you think about equity and inclusion, it is not a healthcare issue. it is a business imperative. You really have to understand the core of that within your own organization in order to reflect that externally with your partners. So there is a big push that Florida Blue has as it pertains to supplier diversity. One of the initiatives that came out of the Equity Alliance that I mentioned earlier is really looking at how much of our dollars were earmarked toward small businesses and supplier diversity chains, which include Black, Hispanic, veteran, LGBTQ. And those are areas that you have to look from a holistic standpoint, and you have a more keen eyesight toward that when it reflects in your organization and it also reflects within your leadership. And so those are, to me, some key areas that I think really shows a community alignment, because it shows that you get it and that you understand that it takes the community, the collective effort, to work together in order to build each other up and create those kind of opportunities and growth. One of the things that we are doing now, I'll quickly put in a FYI, if you will. Broward and Beyond is having a small business conference on this coming Friday, and we're a signature sponsor of that. And when we learn and know that here in Broward County, small business is the number one industry. I think the number is 86,000 small businesses are reflected here in Broward County, the number one industry. And 80%, close to 90% of that number is 25 and less employees. Think about that. That's huge. Those are huge numbers. And when you have that many, right? That many organizations that I have all those kind of resources out here available to us, when we can work together, when we can realize what that looks like, and we all come together and work collaboratively to help build them up, it just allows for everyone to benefit. So, those are some of the initiatives and platforms I believe really align to the question at hand and to the understanding that this is a business imperative for all to keep top of mind.
Right, right. And, being able to tie to business imperative, to your point, I do believe also continues to action, create a more meaningful action, right? And within the organization itself, right? Because it's not sort of a lost cause. When you talk about business imperatives, there's impact back to the actual organization in terms of, what they're looking to achieve with its healthier communities, right? Stronger this, or deepening the levels of engagement among employees because of all this great work that's being done, which then that leads me to the follow-up question to all of this. And Darrell, I'm going to start with you. When you talk about external connections, those tend to be, I think, in my opinion, it's a little bit more manageable. I mean, they take time. Where I find that the real work needs to happen is internally with employees, right? I just find that employees, they, depending on where their head and heart is around all this stuff, it takes some coaxing and convincing just to say, we want you to be a part of the solution. Sometimes you get some people that are jaded and like, this is not, we've done so much and nothing has really changed, right? So why should I care? Just let me keep working and give my paycheck and let's keep it moving. So how do you involve employees at all levels, right, within the organization in shaping and driving DEI initiatives? And what steps do you take to create that foster a sense of ownership and accountability among staff members, right? It's that group where the real work, I think, needs to occur in order to drive meaningful change. So Darrell, I'll throw the question to you, and then I'll ask the others to chime in around employee engagement.
Yeah, so for us, it's because we're lucky enough to, we have a philanthropies division, we have the various business groups within Microsoft who can solely focus on this work. And me and my team, we're that is 100% of our job, is engaging the community and driving this change that we sought after. For us, what we're seeing is, we have so many other employees who aren't doing this on a day-to-day basis. A lot of them sometimes still to this day, I do informational sessions of people being like, oh my God, I had no idea we was doing this. I had no idea we were doing all of these things.
Mhm.
And what I have, recognized, because I used to be one of them. I used to be an engineer and I used to just be coding all day and didn't do this type of work. And I understand what it means for these employees to have a sense of proudness of where they work and
Mhm.
also to be involved. So one of the things that we do is we identify those volunteer opportunities so that these other employees can also be a part of this movement that we're putting together. So, whether it's, something very technical in supporting nonprofits, or what we give a lot of is, can we have people speak to our youth? Can they see, engineers at Microsoft that look like them? Can you come out and, host workshops and things of that sort? So these are the things that we do to pull alongside the rest of the company who are not waking up and doing this every day like us, but start to, build a little bit of that muscle memory for them that they can be involved. And for a lot of them, a lot of people want to be involved, but they don't know how. So this really is a great way to handhold them into being part of the social impact.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a great point, and I do agree that it's most folks just don't know what they don't know, because if you're not sharing what the organization is actually doing relative to this work, how can you ask them to step up, right, and be part of the solution? So it sounds like you do some road shows and what have you, and info sessions to elevate the conversation. And ultimately, and I hope this is where this all leads, right, is also that you see the impact to your employee engagement surveys, that people feel a sense of connection to the organization because of the work that's been done and continues to be done to support their local communities. So Joel, I want to hear from you, and then Cindy, what are you doing to make sure that your employees are connected to the opportunity and get them involved?
Yes. So 3 years ago, we actually launched a strategy that we call All In Outdoors, meaning all
Mhm.
employees,
Yeah.
right? And so our actual strategy is an idea strategy. So it's inclusion, diversity, equity, and action. Because we believe that you can have inclusion, diversity, and equity, but without action, then it stands still. And so we formulated inclusion councils that are made up of all of our business units,
Mm.
all of our brands, and then they help to drive the strategy to evaluate the work that we're doing. Are we
Mhm.
communicating effectively? Do we need to switch or to change anything? But what we've done recently is that now our business units have their own inclusion councils. So you have the representatives that come up to the corporate inclusion council, but then in our actual locations, the inclusion councils, those employees are the ones that are driving the work. So no longer is it Jill, the vice president of corporate responsibility and inclusion.
Mhm.
It's Cindy, who I work with every day. And Cindy is talking to me about the work that's being done. And even for those employees who have been skeptical, or,
Mhm.
the media drives a lot of the conversation and the narrative
Yeah.
around DEI. I know Cindy. I go to church with Cindy. Our kids play together. And so Cindy is now talking about this work in a different way that is, I may not be all the way there yet, but I do know that I can trust Cindy. And so those local inclusion councils are helping to really change the narrative to be the face of the work that our employees are doing. And some of our business units are also, we've started very slowly, hopefully one day it'll be different, but we started to embed inclusion staff within each of
Mhm.
those
Yeah.
business units, right? And so we're piloting that now, so that now it's personal accountability, that our local inclusion councils, our employee
Mhm.
resource groups, they're beginning to talk and share this message. We also have an internal website that lists tools and resources. We do an inclusion or an idea speaker series where we bring in subject matter experts, and all of those recordings are on that internal website so that our employees can go back and look at that. And we also provide speaking guides to say, hey, have small conversations to
Mhm.
talk about what you heard, not just watch it and go on with your day. But how can you then, have additional conversations and drive it beyond the session? And then we also provide, some what we call inclusion insights, little decks that we can provide to our leaders, so that when they're having their town hall meetings or when they're having their group meetings, how can they begin to talk about some of this work so that it's coming from, again, the leader, somebody that they trust, that they know, their local employees that they work with, and being reinforced from my team. And so because of that, you mentioned the engagement survey, we call it our experience survey. We did see an increase, right? So when we took that survey 2 years ago, there was an increase as it relates to inclusion, as it relates to belonging. And we'll take that again later this year. And I'm hoping we'll see another increase because of the work that's being done.
Thank you, Jill. How about you, Cindy? What are you all doing in terms of deepening the employee involvement in the work?
Yeah. Another great question. I think about Broward, and I was looking at some of the numbers here recently, and there's been a really nice growth, if you will, in youth. And that could be, another impact to COVID
Mhm.
in terms of the number of children that have are now in our count, if you will, from in Broward County. And the reason why I bring that up rather is just the importance of understanding that that whole cliche, the children are our future. So being able to have employees that understand the volunteering impact that they make when we are able to offer students internship opportunities that give individuals who may be in rural communities the opportunity to not only have exposure to positions that give them great technical skill set, but also they're able to really understand how to navigate in a business environment that may not otherwise have had that opportunity to do so prior to graduating and making that transition. So at Guidewell Florida Blue, we do have what is called a LEAP program, where we every year bring in 6 interns, and they get the opportunity to go through this ongoing interning program through their school years, as well as during the summer breaks, if you will. And that's an ongoing opportunity that they could tap into after graduation, and they could transition into a management training program
Mhm.
that then allows them to advance their skill set and experience even more. So we don't just stop it at the intern. If they choose to continue their career with Florida Blue, they can manage it that way onward. And then we have another program called PEBS, which means Partners Education Business. But that particular program is geared toward those rural community high schools. And we actually have a Florida Blue center that we put into those high schools, and we employ those students full time in these rural communities. And now they're able to have an ongoing full-time income that they can bring home to support maybe the household needs, or just manage, personal expenses on their own. So think about that. You think about that kind of an impact, and that particular program has been going on for 30 years. We have managed 125 students through that program, and many of them have continued their career on with Florida Blue. So those are the things that we're looking at from the long term. When you think about growing resilient communities, it takes
Mhm.
that type of long-term investment to ensure that happens. So again, that it also requires your team, your employees, to be able to pour into those students, those individuals, and help guide them along the way. So it's full circle. It's definitely full circle.
Yeah. So again, what I'm hearing from Jill and Darrell and yourself is that getting the employees engaged and being a part of whatever sort of endeavors absolutely helps to make sure that they're involved, and then there's accountability there. And I do believe also that as you kind of start connecting with some employees, people tend to talk to one another, right? So, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you should really get involved with this thing. I get to go out to the community, or I get to mentor a young person, blah, blah, blah. And, hopefully it starts to grow very organically from there. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, right? Because we've talked a lot about sort of the action items and the how and how things are sort of happening and what have you. But I do believe that we also need to talk about measuring, right, the effectiveness of all these DEI efforts. So I really want to go into, what are the metrics and indicators that you use now to track your progress and your success, and, possibly identifying areas of improvement. And Cindy, I want to start with you. So, what are you doing to measure the effectiveness of DEI and all the great efforts? And it sounds like Florida Blue has it going on, right? So if you can share with me a little bit about what you all are doing to track and measure, and then Darrell, I'll go to you, and then Jill.
Yeah. And I failed to mention the one school that we have in Broward County that we have a PEBS program in is Dillard High School. So that's been something that we've invested into here locally. But I'll give my own personal experience, and then I'll also share what Florida Blue is doing. Personally, the DEI aspect of it for me was when I attended Florida A&M University. School of Business and Industry, excuse me. Dr. Sybil Mobley was our dean at the time. She's since passed away, but she made an indelible impact in so many of our lives. And one of the ways she did that was to ensure that many of us brown-skinned folks, when we would enter college, we didn't have the experience or the exposure that I was mentioning earlier, where you're able to understand how to navigate in business environments. Yeah, you may have the academic fortitude in terms of how to do the work, but sitting down and at a dinner table, which fork do you grab, which glass do you pick up, those types of just basic things that weren't basic common knowledge to us. And she required us to take what are called professional development courses to be able to be in those environments and not embarrass ourselves. Think about that. So how to wear suits, how to, all of those basic things that weren't basic common knowledge to us. So it takes people leaders, if you will, to understand how impactful that is, because those are things that have now carried on with me for the rest of my life, and it's going to carry on in a domino effect to everybody I mentor and my child, and that I'm going to guide, of course. So those are things that we want to continue to invest in for that reason. We want to make sure everybody has equal opportunity for being successful in these kind of environments. Florida Blue, we have what are called a big focus on our HR team when it comes to recruiting and when it comes to leadership development. So we have a very strong team in place to ensure that there is a diverse reflection in our in how we hire. Whether we're hiring someone with disability, whether we're hiring someone, like I mentioned, LGBTQ, veteran, Hispanic, Black, women. So there's layers to intentional effort around making sure that our organization reflects the people we manage and care for on a day-to-day basis. So that is an intentional effort through our proactive recruiting efforts. Is also an intentional effort in how our HR leadership team manage succession planning in our organization.
Thank you, Cindy. And just as a reminder to those that are with us via the webcast, please place any questions you might have in your chat box. I know it's, time is definitely running out, and I can't believe how quickly time elapses when you're having good conversation. So please do drop them in. I already see one question. We'll get to it next. So Darrell and Jill, I'll ask you just, if you can just bullet pointed in terms of what metrics y'all are using to really quantify the great work you're doing at your respective organizations. So Darrell, I'll go with you, and then Jill, you can wrap up the question.
Yeah, so D&I is a very broad term, so it depends on what you're doing. I think there are some activities such as, more diversity in hiring to where you can easily attach metrics to it. The work that I do and what some people do that are more, outward focused and community focused, I love Jill's term. It is an ultra marathon. So with that said, and this is what I fought for, is there is no metric that I can come up with today that is telling the story. When you're doing things that is human changing behavior, we may not truly be able to quantify the results for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from now. So the most that, in my opinion, we can do, what we can do from a metric standpoint, is show the activity in the areas that's needed. So for me, the metrics that I report on is, yes, how many nonprofits are we bringing our resources to? How many communities at a zip code level are we engaging with? And then also looking at, a lot of social determinant factors and being able to say, where are we going with our work to those communities that are most in need? And at the end of the day, because I'm focused on putting the power behind the back of the nonprofits, if I can just get to them and then let them do their work, those metrics will show, but it will be quite a long time from now before we can really point back and say, okay, because of those 2020 commitments, here's what the impact that we saw.
Perfect, Darrell. And Jill, again, you have just like quick bullets in terms of what y'all doing to measure your success in DEI endeavors.
Yep, and I'll make it, fairly quick. We just measure, we have 4 pillars: expand, advance, enrich, and influence. So we look at expanding our talent, advancing our current talent, enriching the employee experience, and then influencing the industry. And so how do we measure all of those and the underlying impact that it has across inclusion? And so we have a dashboard that we check and communicate with on a regular basis.
So a dashboard, that's remarkable. And so expand, advance, what was it?
Enrich, and influence.
Enrich and influence. That's fantastic. So thank you for sharing all those thoughts. We did get one question. It is 10:40, and I think I have maybe 5 minutes before we conclude the session. There will be a poll, by the way, so make sure that when that poll is dropped, that everyone on webcast takes the opportunity to complete it. And then, of course, at 11 o'clock, the panels will pick back up with another session. So, do your bio breaks, but come back and listen to the rest of the conference because it's been phenomenal so far. So one of the questions that came in was, what benefits do DEI initiatives bring to businesses in terms of performance, innovation, competitiveness? So what benefits do DEI initiatives bring? So whoever just wants to raise their hand and start the conversation, and we'll start to wrap things up. Go ahead, Darrell. Okay.
I'll go really quick. I mean, for most businesses who are selling some product or some service, your consumer base is very diverse. So the more that you are engaging in DEI activities, whether it's within your walls or extending out within the community, you're ensuring that you're building products and solutions for who ultimately is your consumer base. And even when we think of things that relates to technology, how can we make sure that we have more diverse people that are behind the scenes of the latest AI innovations and things of that sort, so that these products that we see come from that don't have the biases and things of that sort.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because as you think about that, I've been reading different articles about AI and the algorithms, and it's all what gets inputted into these systems, right? And by whom. So therefore you need a diverse group of folks who are doing the inputting of whatever data points to make sure that it's not biased in terms of the response. And I'm not a techie person, but I'm dangerous enough to understand what needs to happen to get it right. So Cindy, do you want to just share a little bit about, how DEI drives business outcomes in terms of innovation, competitive, and performance?
Was that to me?
Yeah.
So DEI in general, I could make this quick, is one area for me that I think is important is it gives a diverse perspective. You have multiple ways of looking at certain innovative ideas because of individuals' cultural backgrounds, experiences, and depictions of how things are needed, if you will, and what's needed and why. So when you look at it from that perspective, just from a whole global overarching perspective, you really have a diverse thought, diverse representation to ensure that you're identifying the best solution that meets most needs.
Perfect. Jill, what are your thoughts?
Yep, and I'll just say really quickly, there are numbers of studies and data and facts that show that DEI drives innovation. innovation, you have better teams, you have higher revenue. And so when we're thinking about tying this back to the business strategy, yes, it's the right and the moral thing to do, but it also helps to have better businesses. So if you want to have higher innovation, new product innovation and sustainability, diverse teams bring that to the table. And so DEI is at the core of that.
I love it. I love it. So at the end of the day, I guess what we've heard today is that when you think about deploying a truly impactful diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, it's going to take a village to really move the agenda forward. And that it's a long-term approach, not a one and done. And that you have to involve both internal and external stakeholders to really drive change. And ultimately, there are real meaningful impacts to business, right? When you connect it back to business imperatives in terms of deepening the level of engagement among employees, hopefully seeing, communities flourish. And there's just so many benefits. And at the end of the day, when you think about DEI, is definitely, it benefits society as a whole. And I think, sometimes what happens is that it gets sort of mislabeled, if you will, in terms of how it can be more exclusionary, but it's the opposite is true of that. It's actually creating space for all the beautiful voices to be seen and heard. And you all have done a terrific job of amplifying this conversation today. So Cindy, Darrell, and Jill, I thank you so much for being part of this dynamic power panel. And I thank the Urban League for the opportunity to moderate it. And we launched a poll, so the poll should be alive to the audience. Please make sure you complete that. And don't forget, at 11 o'clock, the next session will begin. So get your coffee, get your tea, do your bio break, and be right back. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you again for being with us today. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Bye now.
We need to provide culturally sensitive care to everybody, and that means that everyone has an opportunity to achieve optimal health and well-being by the care that we provide.
Memorial Healthcare System is fully dedicated to being a healthcare leader when it comes to belonging and equity. We prioritize creating an inclusive environment where individuals from all backgrounds feel valued and heard.
I define belonging and equity as creating a place where people want to receive their care in a very equitable fashion, right? Without sort of bias and discrimination, to be seen and heard and treated with respect and dignity. And then for our staff, that they want to come to work each and every single day at our organization knowing that they can bring their true authentic self without fear of judgment.
But our commitment extends beyond the workplace and into the delivery of care itself.
We measure through our employee survey, we measure through patient surveys, and then the data of equitable outcomes and how we deliver care to our community.
Once we start seeing results in our patient metrics and the fact that our employee surveys continue to show that we are creating a deep level of engagement, that's where we want to be. That's a long-term vision for this work.